final resting place of ancient Egyptian Queen Nefertiti could finally have been discovered thanks to advances in modern technology.
For over 3,000 years, the world believed Nefertiti was the definition of perfect beauty, until scientists uncovered a DNA code that suggests something was terribly wrong beneath her skin. Look at her. The flawless symmetry, the smooth, untouched features, the long, elegant neck rising like something not entirely human. Preserved behind glass in Berlin, this ancient face has become the global standard of beauty, studied, admired, even replicated. She wasn't just a queen, she became an idea, a symbol of perfection that outlived entire civilizations. But perfection doesn't come without a cost. For decades, scientists have tried to answer a question that refused to die. Was Nefertiti naturally this perfect, or was something else hidden beneath the surface? When modern genetic research began tracing the royal bloodline of her era, expectations were clear. They would find rare, refined DNA, the kind that explains impossible beauty. Instead, they found something no one was prepared for. Buried deep within the genetic patterns linked to her family was evidence of severe instability, mutations, distortions, biological warning signs that painted a completely different picture, one not of perfection, but of deterioration. The closer they looked, the more disturbing it became, because the face the world fell in love with may have never truly existed. The famous bust, crafted over 3,300 years ago, wasn't just a portrait. It was a carefully engineered illusion, a masterpiece designed to hide a reality so unsettling, it had to be reshaped, reimagined, and immortalized in flawless stone. And what that illusion was hiding changes everything. Before we expose what they discovered, hit like and subscribe, because some say the truth about Nefertiti was never meant to be seen. For centuries, the sands of Egypt kept their silence. Tombs were plundered, mummies torn apart in search of amulets, names chiseled from walls by the tools of enemies. It seemed the truth was lost forever. But in the 21st century, archaeology changed. The romantics in cork helmets were replaced by geneticists in white lab coats. The Valley of the Kings became a giant forensic laboratory. CT scanners sliced through mummies with their rays without removing a single bandage. DNA sequencers bored into bone dust to read a code written centuries earlier, and what they found in the dried-out cells of royal mummies shattered the beautiful legend. The DNA code they were seeking, the genetic signature of Nefertiti's bloodline, was not a code of beauty. It was a code of ruin. This is not a love story. This is the story of a biological catastrophe. The story of a family that, in its pursuit of divine purity of blood, transformed itself into a cabinet of genetic horrors. We are opening the secret medical dossier of the 18th dynasty. We are tearing off the golden masks to see the true face of those who ruled the world. And that face is terrifying. Prepare yourself. You are about to see ancient Egypt as only forensic pathologists have seen it. Our investigation begins not in a palace, but in a place that more closely resembles a crime scene. The year is 1898, the golden age of Egyptology. A Frenchman, Victor Loret, descends into a deep shaft in the Valley of the Kings. He opens tomb number 35, officially the burial chamber of the great warrior pharaoh Amenhotep II. But Loret finds something strange. The tomb had been reused. During an era of unrest, priests gathered royal mummies from plundered crypts and hid them here, in a cache, to save them from looters. But in one of the side chambers, in a cramped, stifling niche, directly on the bare stone floor, amid dust and debris, lay 3 bodies. They had no sarcophagi, they had no golden masks. Their linen wrappings had been roughly torn away by ancient grave robbers searching for precious scarabs on the chests of the deceased. It was a ghastly family scene. The first was an elderly woman. Her long, thick chestnut hair had survived intact, falling across her shoulders. Her face, distorted by death, conveyed a strange calm. Archaeologists called her the Elder Lady. Beside her lay a boy of approximately 10 to 12 years. His head was shaved, except for the side lock of youth at his temple. The third was a young woman, the Younger Lady. One glance at the younger lady made even seasoned researchers, accustomed to the sight of death, recoil. It was the face of a martyr, a vast gaping void where her mouth and left cheek had been. Her jaw was shattered, her teeth knocked out and driven into her throat. Her left eye socket had collapsed inward. Her right arm had been wrenched off and lay separately, as though torn out by the roots in a final, desperate struggle. Her ribcage had been caved in. Who was she? Why was she not buried with the honors befitting a queen? Why was her body discarded in a stranger's tomb, like a broken doll, stripped of its name? In ancient Egypt, a name was the key to eternal life. To deprive a mummy of its name, its Ren, was to kill the soul, the Ba, for a second time, condemning it to wander in oblivion forever. Someone very powerful wanted the world to forget this woman, but DNA remembers everything. 100 years after the discovery, these bodies began to speak. The year is 2010, Cairo Museum. Deep in a basement shielded from the city's heat and dust, a sterile DNA laboratory worth millions of dollars has been established. Dr. Zahi Hawass, a living legend, assembles an international team of the finest geneticists from Germany, Italy, and Egypt. The project is called the Family of Tutankhamun, but its real target, the secret that every scientist on the team whispered about, was the DNA of Nefertiti's bloodline. What had produced that face? What genetic formula had crafted that beauty? The task was titanic, bordering on science fiction. Extracting DNA from a mummy that had lain in a scorching desert for 3,300 years is like trying to reconstruct a novel from confetti after an explosion. Heat is DNA's greatest enemy. It tears the long molecular chains into tiny fragments. Moreover, ancient embalmers used aggressive chemistry, hot bitumen, conifer resins, natron, and salt. These substances permeated flesh and bone, chemically destroying or blocking genetic material. There was yet another problem: contamination. Over 3,000 years, hundreds of people had touched the mummies: priests, looters, explorers, tourists. The DNA of modern humans could have settled on the mummies and distorted the results. But the scientists took unprecedented precautions. They used specialized microdrills, resembling dental instruments, to reach the very core of the bones, where DNA might have been preserved in a kind of time capsule. They took samples from deep within the femurs, places untouched by human hands, or the resins of embalmers. Computers ran around the clock, reading millions of sequence fragments. They searched for microsatellites, short tandem repeats, unique genetic fingerprints passed from parents to children. When the results were ready, the scientists could not believe their eyes. They repeated the tests in an independent laboratory in the United States. There was no mistake. The puzzle had come together, and the picture it revealed was terrifying. The first blow science dealt to the romantic myths. Genetics confirmed that the elder lady from Tomb 35 was the great Queen Tai, wife of Amenhotep III, and the younger lady was the biological mother of Tutankhamun. This was a world-class sensation. We already knew Tutankhamun's father, the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, whose body had been found in the mysterious tomb K-Wife-55. DNA confirmed it. Now we had found the mother. But who was she? Not Nefertiti. A secondary wife, a sister wife. The genetic analysis went further. Scientists compared the DNA of the younger lady with that of the great pharaohs of the past. They discovered that her parents were Amenhotep III and Queen Tai. Now, pay attention. The parents of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's father, were also Amenhotep III and Queen Tai. The conclusion was as unavoidable as a tribunal's verdict. Akhenaten and the younger lady were full brother and sister, sharing the same father and mother. Here is what stunned the scientists about Nefertiti's beauty. The legend of the great love between Akhenaten and Nefertiti, who supposedly bore him an heir, began to crack. Historical records are clear. Nefertiti is never called a king's daughter by blood. Her titles are Great Royal Wife, Lady of the Two Lands. Most likely Nefertiti came from another branch of the nobility, and this means something devastating. Nefertiti's celebrated face, the face on that bust, was not the product of royal bloodline refinement. It was the product of ordinary genetics. Meanwhile, the mother of the most famous pharaoh in history was not the legendary beauty from the bust. It was Akhenaten's nameless sister, used as a biological vessel. Tutankhamun was the product of the most severe first-degree incest. But here is what truly left scientists stunned. If Nefertiti's beauty was ordinary genetics, then the royal blood that was supposed to produce divine perfection had instead produced biological catastrophe. The DNA code of this family was not the code of beauty. It was the code of collapse. Why did they do it? The ancient Egyptians knew nothing of genetics, but they were obsessed with theology. The gods married their sisters. Osiris wed Isis, Set wed Nephthys. Pharaohs considered themselves the earthly embodiments of the gods. They believed their blood was liquid gold, a solar substance. To mix it with the blood of an ordinary person, even a high-ranking nobleman, would dilute the divine essence and weaken Egypt's magical protection. They sought to create a race of superhumans equal to the gods. But instead of gods, they bred monsters. Nature knows no titles. Nature knows the laws of inheritance, and those laws took terrible revenge for their arrogance. Look at the art of the Amarna period. Statues of Akhenaten look like props from a horror film or science fiction. An elongated egg-shaped skull, a disproportionately long and narrow horse-like face with a heavy jaw, a slender swan-like neck, and yet broad, almost feminine hips, a sagging belly, swollen breasts, and thin, spider-like fingers. For a long time, historians said, "This is a new style, this is symbolism." Akhenaten wanted to show that the god Aten is both father and mother of all creation, so he portrayed himself as androgynous. UFO enthusiasts cried, "This is proof of ancient contact, alien hybrids." The DNA tests revealed a prosaic and frightening truth. This is neither style nor cosmos. This is disease, severe, systemic pathology. The family suffered from a whole constellation of genetic disorders caused by inbreeding. First, Marfan syndrome, a probable phenotype, a genetic disorder of connective tissue that produces those very spider-like fingers, arachnodactyly, elongated limbs, chest deformity, and heart problems. Second, gynecomastia, a familial hormonal imbalance leading to estrogen dysregulation, causing breast growth in men and female pattern fat distribution around the hips. This explains Akhenaten's unusual physique. Third, craniosynostosis, premature fusion of the skull sutures. The child's brain grows, but the cranium cannot expand sideways, so it is forced to elongate backward, taking on the shape of a melon. This is an agonizing condition, often accompanied by severe headaches. Fourth, Antley-Bixler syndrome, an extremely rare mutation causing fusion of the ulnar and radial bones and cranial deformity. They were disabled. The golden boy Tutankhamun, whom we imagined as a young athlete charging on a chariot and felling enemies with a bow, was in reality a pitiful cripple. The tomography of his body, a virtual autopsy, read like a medical encyclopedia of pathologies. He had a cleft palate, a classic marker of incest. He had severe scoliosis, a curved spine. But the most devastating were his legs. He had a club foot on his left foot and literally walked on the edge of his sole, twisting the foot outward. He also suffered from Köhler disease type 2, a vascular necrosis of the bones of the foot. The tissue of his bones was dying, starved of blood supply. This caused hellish pain with every step, comparable to walking on broken glass. Blood supply to his toes was impaired, oligodactyly on the right foot. In his tomb, 130 walking canes were found. Some show heavy wear on precisely the side onto which he bore his weight. These were not symbols of power or fashion accessories. They were crutches. He could not stand without support. The great pharaoh, the living god, the lord of the two lands, was a 19-year-old boy, rotting from within because of his ancestors' ambitions. He did not die in battle. He died in bed, broken by his own genetics. Let us return to the younger lady, the mother of this unfortunate king. Who was she? Most likely her name was Nebeda, or Bakataten, one of the lesser daughters of Amenhotep III, whose name rarely appears in the chronicles, but her death raises more questions than her life. Forensic scientists conducted a detailed reconstruction of the blow using three-dimensional modeling of the skull. This was no accident, not a falling stone during an earthquake, not the carelessness of tomb robbers. The blow was delivered by a heavy, sharp-edged weapon, most likely a battle axe, a flanged mace, or an adze. It landed directly on her face, diagonally from left to right. The blow shattered her upper jaw, destroyed her nose, knocked out her teeth, and drove them into her throat, caving in the eye socket and pushing bone fragments into the brain. The presence of fibrin, a protein involved in blood clotting, at the edges of the bone wound proves that the woman's heart was still beating at the moment of the blow. As her blood was trying to heal the wound, she was alive. She saw her killer, and the blow was delivered from the front. This was an execution or a murder committed in a state of violent rage with monstrous brutality. Who could have done this? The historians' theories lead into the darkest corridors of the palace at Akhenaten. Akhenaten is dying or weakening. The country is in chaos. The religious reform has failed. The priests of Amun hunger for revenge. Inside the palace, a vicious struggle for power is underway. Perhaps the younger lady was killed as a symbol of the old regime. Or was it feminine jealousy? Nefertiti, the great wife, wielded colossal power. She was depicted as her husband's equal, but she could not give birth to a son. She had 6 daughters, and her husband's obscure sister had produced an heir, Tutankhamun. Could the most beautiful of women, the icon of style, have issued an order to eliminate her rival? Could that blow to the face have been an act of symbolic hatred, to erase the beauty of the woman who dared to give the god a son when Nefertiti herself had failed? The manner in which the younger lady's body was embalmed speaks of haste and contempt. The incision for organ removal was made crudely. The mouth was not closed or secured. In Egyptian tradition, an open mouth meant an eternal scream and the inability to speak in defense at the judgment of Osiris. They did not merely want to kill her. They wanted to curse her. She was given neither a name nor a sarcophagus. Her body was dumped in a pile with others, like refuse. But the most heartbreaking and terrifying discovery awaited scientists in Tutankhamun's own tomb. In the corner of the treasury, inside a simple wooden box, lay 2 tiny anthropoid coffins coated in black resin. Inside, the mummies of 2 infants, girls. DNA. Testing confirmed these were Tutankhamun's children. And who was the mother? The mother was Ankhesenamun. Who was Ankhesenamun? The daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun were half-siblings through their father. The circle closed again. The madness continued. Brother married sister. Children born of incest, already profoundly ill themselves, married each other. Nature said, "Stop. The genetic reserve of resilience is exhausted." The first girl, specimen 317A, was born premature at 5 months of gestation. She never drew a single breath. The second girl, specimen 317B, was carried almost to term, but the tomography revealed a horrifying picture of fetal development. The child had Sprengel's deformity. The scapula had fused to the spine, and the shoulder was unnaturally elevated. She also had spina bifida and severe scoliosis. She was not viable. The 18th dynasty, the dynasty of the great Thutmose conquerors, the builders of Luxor and Karnak, did not end on the battlefield beneath the chariots of the Hittites. It ended in the silence of a delivery room, in pools of blood and a mother's tears. Their genes were so corrupted that they could no longer reproduce. They had become a biological dead end. The blood of the gods had turned to acid, killing the unborn. Tutankhamun, himself a sick boy, buried his children knowing that his lineage was doomed. This is the true tragedy of the Golden Pharaoh, not the mythical curse of the mummy written about in the newspapers of the 1920s, but the real curse of DNA. So, where is Nefertiti? If the younger lady is Akhenaten's sister, and not Nefertiti, who wasn't born a king's daughter, then where did Egypt's most powerful queen disappear? For years, historians believed she died of plague or fell from favor around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, when her name suddenly vanished from records. But newer evidence tells a different story. Inscriptions from the Deir el-Bersha quarries suggest that in the 16th year of Akhenaten's reign, just before his death, Nefertiti was still alive, still powerful, and possibly ruling beside him as co-regent. Then comes the theory that changes everything. Nefertiti may have outlived her husband and taken the throne herself, not just as queen, but as pharaoh, Some believe she ruled under the name Nefertiti or even Smenkhkare, leading Egypt alone and trying to stabilize a collapsing dynasty. She may have even begun reversing Akhenaten's radical religious changes. But if she ruled Egypt, where is her body? In 2015, Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves made a shocking discovery while analyzing high-resolution scans of Tutankhamun's tomb. Behind the painted walls, he noticed straight lines, possible hidden doorways. His theory? KV62 may not be Tutankhamun's tomb at all. It's too small for a king, and its layout matches a queen's burial. Reeves proposed that when Tutankhamun died, suddenly at 19, priests had no tomb ready. In desperation, they buried him in a section of Nefertiti's tomb, sealing her chamber behind a wall. If true, Nefertiti could still be there, right now, hidden just meters away from tourists. Radar scans have hinted at voids behind the wall, but results remain disputed. Authorities have refused to drill, fearing damage. So, we stand before a sealed door, with the key in hand. But no one is allowed to open it. And if Nefertiti is truly behind that wall, then whatever her DNA reveals could rewrite everything we thought we knew.